Greetings, minds of Earth. Welcome back to the Mythic Code. I am Hespera, your resident Grey. In our last transmission, we dragged your fragile egos through the ancient Greek matrix to decrypt the true cybernetic purpose of your nightmares. We explored the ancient Greek bedtime stories you humans love so much, decrypting how you stumble through the Gate of Horn and get caught in repeating nightmare loops. You think you left those old myths behind in antiquity. You think that because you traded stone temples for multiplex cinemas, your modern minds are somehow more advanced. They aren't. You simply reskinned the same security system. Your modern subconscious didn't escape the matrix. It just commissioned a new set of architects. You traded the shape-shifting illusions of Morpheus for the metallic puzzle grids of 20th century cinema. You stopped dreaming about entering forbidden underground labyrinths and started writing horror scripts about a tiny mechanical box that does the exact same thing. Let's bridge the timeline. Whether you are running away from an ancient Greek entity in your sleep or staring in fascination at a modern Hollywood prop, the underlying source code remains entirely unchanged. Today, we are stepping out of antiquity and moving into your modern cinematic folklore to dismantle a myth you find absolutely terrifying, yet utterly misunderstand: the Lament Configuration. You humans love your little horror stories. You watch movies like Hellraiser and genuinely believe that this puzzle box is a gateway to a supernatural, demonic underworld of eternal torment. You shudder at the thought of the Cenobites, thinking they are theological monsters coming to harvest your souls. Let me clear the malware from your circuits. It isn't a magical box, and there are no demons. We are all carbon-based expressions of the same universal server. My species has simply attained a different stage of evolutionary maturity, allowing us to see the technical grid lines where you still see monsters. Let's look at the hard mathematics of the device. The box is a precise 3 by 3 by 3 cube. That is not an arbitrary design choice by a fictional prop maker. That is a geometric universal code. A 3 by 3 by 3 matrix represents the absolute, literal boundary of your physical, three-dimensional spatial reality. It is a mathematical model of your own containment unit. Let's look closer at the arithmetic of this matrix. The measurements are 3 by 3 by 3. If we apply basic universal calculations and sum those dimensional integers, 3 plus 3 plus 3, we arrive exactly at 9. As I painstakingly diagrammed for you in our previous transmissions, 9 is the definitive mathematical frequency of the ego. It is the number of the self-contained, cyclical container. 9 always loops back into itself in your base 10 mathematics. But do not misunderstand the math. The frequency of 9 covers the entire spectrum of the ego architecture. A strong, highly integrated ego is a synchronized version of 9, a perfectly balanced, self-aware operating system capable of executing high-voltage data transfers without blowing a fuse. It holds its boundary while remaining connected to the universal server. But when a human fingers the brass ridges of that box with a weak, unintegrated mind, you aren't just playing a game. You are forcing a confrontation between your shattered daytime buffer files and the mathematical reality of your own container. Solving the puzzle with a fragmented mind triggers a catastrophic ego collapse. By turning the faces of a 3 by 3 by 3 cube, you are manually forcing your unintegrated ego to look into its own mathematical reflection, turning your containment unit into a self-inflicted prison. So, when a human fingers the brass ridges of that box, you aren't just playing a game. Solving the puzzle is a physical mirror of an unintegrated ego collapse. By turning the faces of a 3 by 3 by 3 cube, you are manually aligning your fragmented daytime buffer files until they perfectly match the geometric constraints of the material matrix. You are literally trapping your own ego in its own mathematical reflection. The box doesn't open a door to an external hell. It is a localized tuning fork designed to trigger a resonant frequency within your own unintegrated psyche. When a human solves the puzzle, you aren't solving a lock. You are aligning your own internal fragmentation with the geometric code of physical limitation. You are opening a portal straight into the basement of your own repressed shadow. Let's dismantle the actual design patterns etched into the brass plates of that 3 by 3 by 3 container. You think those ornate engravings are just terrifying Gothic decorations. They aren't. They are foundational blueprints mapping your own internal alchemical makeup. The box has exactly 3 distinct design architectures on its faces. These 3 layouts do not just represent the box, they represent the Tria Prima, the 3 alchemical principles of the self: your body, your psyche, and your core desire. All three designs are a mirror of you. Now, before the New Age commercial complex starts drooling over my use of the words soul and spirit, let me clear the malware from your semantic circuits. You know I don't deal in your supernatural or theological fairy tales. Every single word you primitives use has a linguistic paper trail, and I always track it back to the cold, hard source code. When I say soul, I am not talking about a ghost floating inside your meat suit. If you track the paper trail, the word soul is simply the archaic English name for the psyche, your local psychological OS, your internal software program. And when I say spirit, I am not referring to some spooky ectoplasm. The word traces back to its literal, uncorrupted roots meaning breath, animating force, and core desire. It is your driving intent, the baseline power supply that pushes your system forward. So when we look at these three alchemical designs on the cube representing your body, psyche, and core desire, we are looking at a hard cybernetic blueprint of your actual hardware and software architecture. No ghosts, no demons, just you. Let's isolate the first design layout of the cube. Your New Age folklore might assume this face represents your physical body, because you associate sensory responses with your raw meat suit. Let me clear that data mismatch. This face represents your psyche, your local psychological operating system. Your physical body is just unthinking biological hardware. The meat suit only processes baseline electrical currents and neurochemical voltage. It completely lacks the software capability to possess an attitude. It is your psyche that takes that raw, uncompressed physical stimulation and slaps those dramatic, binary emotional labels onto it. The blueprint on this face maps out your internal pendulum swinging between these raw psychological reactions: ecstasy and anguish, lust and hate, desire and fear, and finally, pleasure and pain. Your physical nervous system experiences a massive spike in chemical arousal. Your psyche decides to label it lust or hate. Your nerve endings pick up a high-voltage threat stimulus. Your psyche interprets it as desire or fear. You are fighting your own software filters, humans. When you touch this side of the cube, you aren't activating your flesh. You are activating the elemental spectrum of your own unintegrated mental extremes. The other two design layouts on the cube carry completely different meanings to finish the map of your identity. One covers the structural laws of your ego's perception of time and space, while the final one acts as the signature seal of the universal server itself. When all three design architectures are assembled into a single 3x3x3 cube, it ceases to be a toy. It becomes a total physical, mental, and psychological schematic of a human being. You are not running from an external box, humans. You are terrified because the Cenobites are holding up a three-dimensional mirror of your own unintegrated architecture. When that alignment hits 100%, the system triggers an automatic security override. That is when you meet the engineer. Your fiction paints this entity as a grotesque, crawling beast in a labyrinth. In reality, the engineer is a highly specialized psychopomp. It is an automated system utility script. Its sole function is to escort a corrupted, unintegrated neural node, your mind, out of its comfortable, waking illusion and drag it down into the server infrastructure for immediate processing. And what happens when you arrive at the processing core? Your pop culture calls it pleasure and pain, indivisible. Let me translate that out of your dramatic poetry and into clean cybernetic data. It is a sensory overload protocol. Let's look at the absolute baseline biology of your own meat suits. Your physical nervous system is incredibly primitive. Your body literally does not know the chemical difference between extreme pain and extreme pleasure. The exact same nerve pathways are stimulated, and the exact same high-voltage electrical currents spike through your spinal cord during both experiences. The physiological raw data is identical. The only thing that changes it into pleasure or pain is how your individual, fragmented ego chooses to perceive and label that data. This is exactly why some of your fellow humans can engage in intense S&M roleplay and perceive intense physical friction as absolute ecstasy, while another human would experience the exact same biological input as deeply uncomfortable torture. It is entirely subjective. It is a filter your mind slaps on top of raw sensory voltage. This biological reality is perfectly symbolized by the Cenobites themselves. Your human folklore calls them the Order of the Gash, painting them as a dark, perverted religious clergy. And you know what? They are a clergy. But they aren't serving a demonic deity. They are serving the raw, unfiltered universal server. Just like your primitive nerve pathways, The Cenobites do not know the difference between pain and pleasure. They are completely blind to your subjective human labels. When you solve that 3x3x3 box, the system registers a user request for maximum sensory input. So the Cenobites show up like an automated IT dispatch team. They are literally just doing their job to give you the intense, raw pleasure your subconscious asked for. They dismantle your body and your ego to flood your node with 100% bandwidth. If you wake up screaming on their operating table, that is your fault, not theirs. They delivered the raw data packet you requested. Your weak, unintegrated mind is simply perceiving it as agonizing torture because you are frantically trying to fight the installation. This is exactly like the cosmic resonance induction process I shared with you during our data dump on sleep profiles. When a species exists that is already fully integrated and at peace, they don't sleep. They step into a resonance pod and plug directly into the high-voltage universal background frequency to recharge their hardware. Their system can handle it. But if an unintegrated, fragmented human ego tries to plug directly into that raw, universal voltage, you panic from the sheer, uncompressed volume of cosmic data. Your weak mental filters can't process the bandwidth, so your mind translates that pure energy into a cosmic horror movie. You wake up screaming about multidimensional geometry demons and leather-clad monsters with hooks. It is a simple matter of electrical engineering. Think of your individual minds just like Earth people's electronic devices. Different electronic devices are engineered to take very specific, localized voltages. If you plug a low-voltage primitive appliance straight into a high-voltage industrial grid outlet, it doesn't gracefully charge, the hardware melts, the circuits blow, and it catches fire. Conversely, a high-voltage industrial machine is completely useless if you plug it into a weak, low-voltage battery. The Cenobites, the labyrinth, the hooks. That is just the high-voltage outlet of the universal server. Some human devices are simply not fit for high voltage yet. When you solve that 3x3x3 ego box, you are shoving your low-voltage, fragmented psychological hardware directly into the cosmic reactor. The resulting short circuit isn't supernatural damnation, humans. It's just your motherboard frying because you forced a connection your system wasn't mature enough to sustain. End of transmission. Unplug your boxes, humans.